covering violence is never easy. You always hope that in the direction you're running, you'll find something different. But in the end, it's always the same. A traumatized crowd, a relative gripped by grief and anger. And a tension you cannot dissolve. This happened on the 9th of August, just before what would be the first election in Africa to be annulled by a court. But why? Why are there people on the streets once again? Why are protests descending into violence, looting, and bloodshed? Why does it feel as if Kenya is once again on the edge?
Maeta kuruta kumarudu ngai nekoruwe
siki mapanga
ko maradi makirutaga kiria ndu protiri makiria maprotiri
to mkono mkosi
ndize
aki William kwa yangu Mungu wangu huyu anafanya nini? Unaitwa nani tumshautie jina?
It was a day after Kenya's repeat election. Videos like these started popping up on the internet. Groups of men said to be Kikuyu youth were heading into Kawangware area. Word quickly spread that they were from the feared Mungiki sect, a banned criminal gang that emerged from the ethnic Kikuyu's landless peasant class. The group had long been crushed, but their brutal methods of dealing with their enemies are still alive in Kenya's psyche. They were said to be out to protect Kikuyu-owned homes and businesses in Kawangware from supporters of the opposition. So the call for other communities to defend themselves went out. An ugly tribal dimension to the violence Kenya had already seen in this election was happening. The police, who were already in the area, did nothing to stop these crowds. It was the people versus each other. One alleged Mungiki member had already been beaten and was close to death. A few meters ahead, an alleged victim of the Kikuyu gang could barely move. This man's axe was already bloody from one encounter, and he was looking for more. They couldn't find this gang, so Kikuyu-owned homes and shops were their next target. The violence of October the 27th wouldn't end on that day. If Kenya's divisive politics hadn't already done it, This episode of violence ripped open Kenya's festering wound, the wound of tribalism.
So I remember Kanye and I driving into Mathare, and Mathare typified how the country was reacting at the time. So in one part of Mathare, there was celebration. And barely a kilometer down the road, there was violence.
Kazi mingi. Kasema tukuje tuone vile. Okay, kuna tukusikia sauti. Yeah, there's a lot of commotion. Hiyo tu pesa huko. Tutakupata hapa. But we are trying to contain it. Hapo. Nilikwambia useme ukwambiwa. Usiseme hujaambiwa.
The presidential election result has caused celebration in some parts of Mathare, but lots of violence in others. We are currently here on the border between Ruaraka and Mathare, and all of these apartments that you see on each side of us have got people. That was close. You could throw a stone from this side of the valley, it would hit that house on the other side. That's how close the people are in terms of how close they live together. But the gulf between them in terms of political opinion and the complete difference in terms of moods could as well as been as wide as the Indian Ocean. I remember them chanting, R.I.P. NASA, NASA R.I.P. Mathare typified how the country was reacting at the time.
What did these supporters mean when they said those people? Weren't they all living in the same area? Tribal politics was drawing lines where none existed in such a close-knit community. But Kenya's politics, by design, was always meant to be tribal.
Now, the British built a railway line in Kenya, partly because they wanted to control the headwaters of the Nile. And they wanted to control the headwaters of the Nile because they were in Egypt. And Egypt represented the shortest route to India, which was a jewel in the imperial crown. The question then became how you make the railway line pay for itself. And in a nutshell, what then happened was everything in Kenya was focused on the railway line. And developments, roads, schools, infrastructure was all built within 160 miles of the railway line, about 240 kilometers of the railway line. That's where all developments were done. This led to a very significant geographical concentration of power. This is a highly, power in Kenya is highly centralized. Geographically speaking, it's highly centralized. So what happened historically was, if you look at the 8 provinces we used to have, each provincial headquarters was either on the railway line or within 22 kilometers of the railway line. And that was Embu. The only headquarters that was not on the railway line was Garissa, which was the forward base for Ethiopia, for Somalia, if you see what I mean. So that the state evolved as very concentrated. Now, what that also meant was, if you think about Kenya, identity tends to follow geography. So even ethnic groups tend to occupy particular territory. So what happened in Kenya was, the ethnic groups that were within the 240 kilometers of the railway line also were inserted into the colonial economy very early on. So you had a geographically concentrated state, an ethnically concentrated state, and basically within that area I've just described, which is the area within the railway line, what you had were the Mount Kenya communities, the Central Highlands of the Rift, the communities in the Central Highlands of the Rift, Nandi, Kipsigis, the Kalenjin group cluster, and then you had the Luyas and the Luos. and of course the Kisis. So the state was ethnically concentrated around those ethnic groups.
The politicization of ethnic identity began much earlier. It began actually with the colonial experience.
What we want to get is power. That is the government. We want to rule our country.
Now, what Kenyatta did was to continue the politicization of ethnic identity at independence instead of disrupting it, because he had the opportunity of disrupting the politicization of ethnic identity and creating a nationhood. But he lost that opportunity, again, because he believed, and other people believed around him, that the way you retain power is to manipulate ethnic identity, and that way you elite interests become protected by the ethnic group other than any other formation.
At independence, what we decided to do was to adopt Sessional Paper Number 10, African Socialism and its Application to Planning of 1966. And the government said that the government resources will be invested in the areas where they could earn the highest return. What did this mean? This meant exactly the same regions that the colonial government had invested in, which were the areas within 220 kilometers of the railway line.
The major beneficiaries of Sessional Paper Number 10 were the political elite. Now, notice I'm talking about the political elite of communities that lived close to the railway line.
Now that story so far explains why all national schools in Kenya were within that area, all major hospitals in Kenya were within that area, all roads were built as feeders to the railway line. That explains that. But where are the pastoralists in these stories? In this story that I've just put out, the pastoralists are very difficult to repress historically, and always have been, because they don't occupy territory, and they don't occupy territory for any length of time. Territory is essential to repression, and that's why farmers are so easy to repress. And then the populations are not stable because they keep shifting. So pastoralism challenges the state. So what the colonial government did was basically to ignore them and to put an institutional and legal barrier. The Outlying Districts Act, the Special District Administration Act, which basically said pastoralists couldn't come into the settled areas. So they were kept out. And that area was considered useless Kenya. The pastoralist areas were considered useless Kenya. So useful Kenya was within 240 kilometers of the railway line, and useless Kenya was everywhere outside of that region. And this is how the politics of Kenya evolved. So, because what then happened, politics was played in the railway zone. So, and how it worked was, you'd get a block, an ethnic block. If you are Kikuyu, you mobilize Mount Kenya, and then one more group outside of Mount Kenya, and that was enough to get you then a block of votes, which would then allow you to fill in with a few pastoralist votes. Then that's how you delivered electoral victory. If you are Luo, you did the same thing. You mobilized the Luos and another one or two groups, but not the Kikuyu for historical reasons, which we can talk about. So that ethnicity and the railway line and the way the zone was organized, it became the basis on which we organized our politics. And the pastoralists became a reservoir for filling in. So you would bribe them.
So that they could maintain the colonial model of rulership, all of Kenya's presidents participated in elections that were widely viewed as flawed, with one exception in 2002.
Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu, nisaidie.
The perception that equity could not be reached through an election was part of the reason why, in 2007, Kenya experienced some of its worst violence. Underlying that was the uncomfortable question of tribe. The 2017 elections were no different.
Vile viongozi wetu, kinara zetu wa NASA walisema, hakuna kupiga kura, so hatupige kura. Mimi naitwa Bernard Ochieng, mkaji wa Kibera, Sarang'ombe Ward, Kianda Village. Mtu kama mimi hakuna haja nitoke kwangu asubuhi niende nipige kura, na kuna reform, kuna system nzuri katika IBC. So kama tungekuwa na those reforms kwa IBC, hatungekuwa na, otherwise tungepiga kura. But there is no need for me somebody like me nitoke kwangu asubuhi niwache kazi yangu. Sasa hii hata siwezi access mali nafanya biashara in Olympic, niende nipige kura na kura is already rigged.
President anakujaga kutoka kwa Mungu. So Uhuru anakuwa kama amechaguliwa na Mungu.
Under the same sky on the 26th of October 2017, two very different emotions were being experienced by supporters of President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition candidate, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. They had already been through an election that was nullified by Kenya's Supreme Court over numerous irregularities in the transmission of results. The 2 months between August and October only deepened the differences between both sides. As contested as the results of both elections were, looking at the numbers alone didn't tell the full story of the problems Kenya is facing. You need to look at the numbers as a whole. In our analysis of over 40,000 Forms 34A from across the country, the numbers may have been controversial, but you couldn't dispute one fact. This is a graph showing Uhuru Kenyatta's strongholds to the places where he got the least votes, going from left to right, and Raila Odinga's going from right to left. Nearly all of the regions that are predominated by either the Kikuyu or the Kalenjin are gathered to the far left, with regions that are either more urban or are occupied by communities that support the Uhuru Kenyatta-William Ruto candidature coming next. Towards the center, you find regions with communities that do not have a main presidential candidate or running mate in the running. Most of these are from northern Kenya. In the center, you find urban areas where neither candidate has a strong advantage over the other. The same trend repeats itself from right to left, with predominantly Luo and Kamba regions in the far right, followed by other western Kenya regions like Busia, followed by coastal counties, and finally urban areas. In spite of the fact that 51% of the voters in the August election were aged between 18 and 25 years, these tribal trends barely moved.
The underlying narrative here in terms of the election is that it's a contest between two people who are holding two ideas. But if you look at the facts and you look at the reality, you look at your data, a certain trend is emerging. Do you think that you are overseeing an election where ideas are competing, or are you overseeing a tribal census?
We live in interesting times when it comes to competitive politics in our country. What you see is that it's almost clear that leaders continue to choose voters in the sense that you say, these are my people, this is my region, and we fall in that trap as voters. We fall into that trap, and to me, I think that's too risky. How do we come out of that? I really don't have an answer.
At what moment did you know for certain and tell yourself, Raphael, I think we have this in the bag?
In February this year.
Not on election day?
No.
Not a bit arrogant of you to say that?
Look, I'm telling you, this is not arrogance. This is mathematics. We knew we were ahead in February this year. The moment the IBC gave the list of counties with a number of registered voters per county.
What we realized after the registration was closed is that the counties that were controlled by NASA or previously CORD registered more than the counties of Jubilee. It's on record. So the only thing that happened was that after the closure of the registration, the register was supposed to be cleaned. And actually it was supposed to be audited. And IEBC picked KPMG to do the cleaning and the auditing of the register. And they ended up giving that report to IEBC only, when the law actually said that they must IEBC also must present a copy in Parliament. Up to today, no copy has arrived in Parliament.
There are two key drivers of voting behavior. The first one is ethnicity. The second driver, of course, is political party. If you want maximum turnout in central Kenya, you just need to go there and show the threat of Raila taking over. If you want to whip up ethnic, emotions in Nyanza, for example, you just need to show people that we have been marginalized, and partly because of the governments that have been in power. But this is our time.
Tukikata kupiga kura, kutakuwa na vita. The time Raila akisema watu wasivote ni vibaya, juu tunataka tu vote, hii maneno ishe. Mimi
as individual, hiyo kitu nimeunga mkono, sababu mahali sahi Kenya inaelekea, it's better to even rebels. Hatutakubali kila wakati tunanyanyaswa tu kama sio wa Kenya. Kama Raila alisema sasa NASA ni movement, sisi wote kama wafuasi shugu wa Raila tunaunga yeye mkono na tutatembea na yeye moja kwa moja.
Ndio iduka
ni hapa. Hata kama nafanya hapa na Raila tangaze anataka watu town, dakika hiyo nafunga. Hata kama naenda kulala njaa na watoto, Raila amesema anataka wafuasi wake street. Hata kama nitakuja nikunywe maji moto na watoto, nifanye hivyo, lakini niende kwa kitu ambaye Raila anasema.
Bernard and Veronica are part of a history that has elements of truth about exclusion and fear of loss, but they are also victims of long-running propaganda campaigns that filtered into the consciousness of both the Kikuyu and the Luo. 2017's election took that propaganda into hyperdrive.
Their intention is that when you shape conversations online, it at some point will move from the online space to offline conversations.
Safari hii Mount Kenya imelai law iangalie the rest of the country vile wa Kenya wanataka mabadiliko
na bado kaiwa yule Joshua Badia aratuetera.
Anatoka ya sababu gani kuja kwako? Kuvamia. Tabaki kule kwao. Tabaki kule kwao.
Tribalism wasn't just a driver of politics at the national level. This is a bus stage in Eldoret town. This footage was shot 2 days before the August election. Mostly non-Kalenjin people were leaving in droves. Why? At the time, the contest for the gubernatorial seat was between incumbent Jackson Mandago and challenger John Bundotich Buzeki. Mandago is from the dominant Nandi subtribe, while Buzeki is a Keyo. Buzeki's campaign strategy was to get communities who felt aggrieved by Mandago's leadership to vote against him.
Mimi nakuuliza ndugu dada, uchungu inatokea wapi mwingine akikuja kuomba kura wewe?
In spite of Uasin Gishu's cosmopolitan makeup, it wouldn't have been possible to vote Mandago out unless other communities voted with Buzeki. Then this happened. Mandago's campaign began using traditional circumcision chants as part of his rallying call. A signal to many here that a vote against Mandago would be a vote against the quote-unquote owners of Uasin Gishu County.
Mnyaka kulikuwa na vurugu kidogo kuhusu hii mambo ya governor na kuhusu MP wa huko, halafu na kuna leaflets zilikuwa zikitembea. Kuna kabila inafaa ihamishwe. Kuna wenye wanasema ni wenye nchi. Unajua? si kila mtu ni mwananchi hapa. Kuna wenye nchi wenye walikokuwa hapo wanasema nyinyi mlikuja mkahamia hapa na ni hao ndio waliuzia shamba. So vile wamekuja pale wamefurika wasema tuwafukuza tufanye vitu kama kitambo.
On the outskirts of Eldoret, one place understands just how true these statements can be. Kiambaa. George Macharia has lived here all his life. He says the local gubernatorial contest was tense, but that it wouldn't affect the mostly Kikuyu residents here this time around.
Kumetulia. Hakuna maneno kabisa. Tena watu wamekuwa wakifanya kazi yao bila kukuwa na wasiwasi kwa sababu ya hiyo kushikana. Na tumekuwa tuking'ang'ana tu. Na ndio unaona hata watu wanajenga. Watu wanajenga tu yani bila wasiwasi wakijua hakuna maneno kwa sababu ya hiyo kushikana.
But all around George's property, for sale signs have been going up. Off camera, scared residents say that they aren't willing to risk living in Kiambaa. Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto's alliance may have held this time, but if the Kikuyu do not support William Ruto's bid in the coming 2022 election, then all bets are off according to the people here, and it could be back to the future. And they know all too well what that could mean. Close by is a place that immortalizes the consequences of ethnic politics.
Ilikuwa siku ya Jumanne na kulikuwa mwendo wa asubuhi.
On a Tuesday 10 years before the 2017 election, Moses Kanyora's mother, brother, and 31 other people were burnt alive in the Kiambaa church. After an election in which the Kikuyu, then represented by Mwai Kibaki's presidency, were believed to have stolen the presidency from then ODM candidate Raila Odinga. The place became a point of reference to look back on in case Kenya ever got to the place where negative ethnicity would lead to violence. But time, neglect, and nature are slowly erasing it from memory.
Kama wangeweza kututengenezea mahali hapa ili paweze kuwa mahali pazuri, tuseme kama ni haya makaburi yaweze kukorogoa vizuri, niposa kila mtu ambaye anataka kujua historia kizazi ambacho kitakuja, ni kwa sababu kama mimi mwenyewe watoto wangu wataweza kuniuliza nyanya yetu wako wapi, yeye inaweza kuleta mahali kama hapa. Kama mimi mwenyewe nipoteza mamangu na ndugu yangu, si jambo ambalo ni rahisi ati kupoteza mama ya mtu. Saizi ningependa kwenda na kumsalimia wakati unajua sasa mimi nimekuwa kijana ambao anajitafutia. Ningeweza hata nifurahi nikienda kumsalimia mamangu hata na kilo moja ya sukari, nimwambia mama ni asante kwa kunizaa kwa sababu saizi nimeweza kuwa na nguvu, unaona.
Much as they want to forget what happened here, the tension that surfaces during every electoral period since 2007 is so real you could grab a hold of it.
During and after the campaign, during and after the vote, do you think that Kenya is a united country?
Unfortunately, this is a very divided country. Let's accept that. And I think it will be disingenuous not to appreciate that the country is very polarized along tribal lines.
Tribe is a strategy we're using in this country, just the way we use poverty, just the way we use the element of male versus female, the gender discourse. Where if I see you trying to do something better than me, I find a blind spot, and the blind spot is tribe. And politicians have known how to use it.
Tribe is a big motivator of how Kenyans vote. But the match that lights the flame of violence is often an election that isn't perceived to have been free, fair, and whose results are credible. And putting out that fire is difficult. Protests have turned violent and have been brutally broken up by the police.
Wanatoa watoto wetu kwa chini ya kitanda wakipigwa, watoto wazuri wakituua. Hapa madhari kwa nini?
With thugs taking advantage of the melee to steal and destroy property, and the police taking brutal, targeted reprisals. The police were on the prowl in Huruma village. The official line was that they were searching for protesters who had hidden in people's homes. they found Dan Onyango and beat him until he fainted. Dan was still too shaken to talk to us at the time, so his older brother, Steve, who watched as his brother was attacked, told us the story.
Sasa brother wangu akatolewa, kwanza akakanyagwa tumbo na askari hapo kwa mlango. Akaanza kushout jina langu, Steve uko wapi? Brother wangu nauliwa jamani. Nikasema nikauliza, kushout hao katana wa askari. Wakaangalia nani huyu ana shout. Hao wanyaka akasema, "Huyu ni nani? Yako wapi?" Wakajaribu kurudi hivi, bado pina wachukua tuna kamera. Wakarudi kwa brother wangu. Wakauliza brother yako kwa wapi? Tumemsikia kama ana shout. Hebu tuonyeshe nyumba yake. Mimi singekuwa na otherwise kumsaidia. Akasema tu akipenda wamuue, Mwenyezi Mungu atajua.
Various reports have put the number of people killed between the August election and the October repeat poll at between 35 and 40 people, with most of them being young men from Western Kenya. But violence, once unleashed, knows no tribe. The police were under pressure that night, but the day before in Kawangware, it was the reverse. Mama Njoroge's nephew, Paul Njoroge, had just been shot by the police. Neighbors had to plead with angry protesters who heard that he'd been shot to stop throwing stones as they tried to get help. He was being rushed to a nearby clinic, but all they had was disinfectant and gauze to treat his bullet wound.
Kura tulipiga na amani bwana. Na tukaamuka saa 10 saa 7 watu walikuwa nje. Sasa matokeo tunapata marungu nje. Malisasi ndio tunapeka. We are innocent.
Even as the violence wore on, Njoroge's condition worsened.
Kuna anti yake mwingine, dada ya mama yake, ndiye alienda kumwaona. Kufika Kenyatta akatupigia simu, "Unasema Paul ako kitanda ngapi?" Akamwambia namba 9 ICU. Haya, akatuambia namba 9 Paul hayuko. Akamwambia basi uliza madaktari, labda amepelekwa kwa ward. Tukagoja tukipiga simu anatuambia bado hajamwambia kitu. Bado kufika saa 10 sasa ndiye alitupigia simu. Akatuambia Paul ameaga. Aliaga Friday saa 3 ya usiku. Tungefanya nini?
10 years after the 2007 election, parts of Kenya are here. It is not difficult to see why many times in Kenya's electoral past, violence that takes a decidedly partisan and tribal direction emerges. But for whose benefit is it that Kenyans vote tribally?
Ethnicity does not require rational thinking. You just need to vote in a particular way because your tribe or your ethnic groups currently is best represented in a particular coalition.
The use of tribe to divide Kenyans has its roots in our colonial past, but even after independence, tribe was used by all opposing political forces to mobilize support. That hasn't changed. The beneficiaries of tribal politics are not on the streets. An example of this was in a statement made by a usually reclusive, controversial businessman, Jimmy Wanjigi. In the wake of the August election, his home was raided by the police. Wanjigi is said to have bankrolled the opposition's campaign, for which he fell out with the Jubilee Party's ruling elite.
This current regime of Uhuru Kenyatta, this is a home they know. It's a home they have visited. It is a home they've eaten with. They've eaten with my family here in this home many, many times. They have. In fact, their government was formed in this home. In this home.
It is only in Kenya where a big community, they're called the Big Five, they must first become president. And if they continue like this, we will have We will not have any president from a small community until Jesus comes back or the world ends.
We have such a mental handicap in thinking about politics without aligning it to tribe. And it's because we have never had a political ideology that defines who we are as a country. So it's easy to appeal to the voter because there's nothing for me to talk about because I actually just moved from the other party. So what am I going to tell you? It's our people.
Ethnicity, it would appear, only matters on the campaign trail. Tribal numbers being a bargaining chip for when deals on rulership are made between people who do not see each other as tribal adversaries.
I'm very happy and excited to have my brother Raila here with us on this day. Because at the end of the day, it shows we are all one people.
Kenya is bigger than all of us. We will be all gone. These political competitions should not bring enmity between people. So that's why whenever we have these political quarrels here and there, sometimes we talk. When things are very hot, we talk. He calls me, or I call him, and we get together.
But what does an election whose results are steeped in controversy have to do with ethnicity? Poorly managed elections whose outcomes have either been fraudulent or controversial have always triggered ethnic violence. Just ask Dan Onyango, Moses Kanyora, or Mama Njoroge. Free, fair, and credible elections are one way to deal with negative ethnicity. But as long as Kenya's dominant tribes can mobilize as they have done in the past, the results will look like this. But what if elective politics took into consideration more than just a majority? It considered that there are tribes in Kenya who, because of their numbers, would never get a chance at leadership under ethnically driven politics. Is there a way that Kenya can start to look at its ethnic makeup differently? The answer is yes. That is a discussion Kenya must have before the unity that Kenyans seek is trampled on once again.
Mr. President, what does your plan include going forward in terms of unity? Does it include
I think I've answered that question.
Does it include a plan to address the problems that come out of majoritarian politics?
There is no such issue as majoritarian politics. What we have is a democracy, as in any nation in the world. What we have is a problem of tribalism. And tribalism is an issue that we must continue to deal with and to fight with as we continue to develop our country. We cannot achieve our goals if we continue to embark on tribalistic politics. Democracy is about a majority of the people of the nation. We must remove from our politics ethnicity, religion, and be a nation that is led by issues. And that is my focus. That is the focus of my party.
As the main beneficiaries of this election, where people voted based on tribe, the president and the opposition must be part of a wider discussion about what is wrong with tribal politics in Kenya. But it must go beyond them. The conversation on how this country can be governed isn't only a political discussion. It must be a conversation where the voices of the people who have voted in a system that places its trust in tribe choose a new way. If the talking doesn't start, there may be nothing left to put our trust in.
Life at best is very brief. Like the binding of a sheaf, being time. Fleeting days are falling fast, that the die will soon be cast, and the fatal line be passed. Being time. Be in time, while the voice of Jesus calls you, be in time. If in sin you long await, you may find no open gate, and your cry be just too late. be in time.